Monkeys don't hibernate. Monkeys don't need to hibernate, but that's exactly what Donkey Kong did. I mean, sort of. With 1983's disappointing Donkey Kong 3, the gorilla that changed video games slipped on his own banana peel, evidently smacking his hairy skull and going into something between hibernation and a coma for more than a decade. But in 1994, it was Nintendo who were in trouble. Competition had weakened interest in their Super NES, and with other consoles gaining steam, the company needed a hero to step up. Much to everyone's surprise, that hero would be Donkey Kong. Not only did the long-slumbering gorilla put Nintendo back on top, but he did it with a game that would become widely regarded as one of the best platformers of all time. Donkey Kong didn't step back into the spotlight, he blasted back into it out of a freaking barrel. And this is what it looked like. This is Donkey Kong Country for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Of course, credit for this brilliant revival doesn't belong exclusively to Nintendo. After all, for more than a decade, the company seemed to have no intentions of waking its mighty ape whatsoever. It wasn't until the British studio Rare approached Nintendo about reviving the series themselves that Donkey Kong finally began to stir. Now, if you weren't around back then, this may seem strange to you, but in 1994, Donkey Kong Country was arguably the best-looking game ever released for a home console. Rare used pre-rendered 3D graphics to create a sort of 2D, 3D visual hybrid. You were moving from left to right as you had for years, but the game created the illusion that you were doing it in a real three-dimensional world. A world where even the weather changed as you played. A world with truly unprecedented depth and possibility. Donkey Kong Country was no flatformer. A wonderful marriage of technology and a visionary art style, Rare had created a game that was unlike anything we'd ever seen before, and they did it on a 16-bit console. Obviously, the graphics were the hook that got you interested in Donkey Kong Country, not to mention an insane marketing campaign that even included VHSs being sent to people's homes, but what kept you interested was its unique approach to platforming. Now, the mechanics are familiar. You're running and jumping onto platforms and enemies, but unlike the Super Mario games, for example, Donkey Kong Country has a sort of rhythm to its gameplay. Many of the obstacles you encounter, both enemies and objects, have a distinctly bouncy rubber feel, and they're laid out in a way that encourages you to take advantage of that trait. You feel like there's a specific timing to stomping your enemies thanks to deliberate placing and level design, and that gives Donkey Kong Country a unique feel and, frankly, an irresistible gameplay hook. There's also a strong sense of variety in Donkey Kong Country. Because you're playing with both Donkey and Rare's newcomer Diddy Kong, the game is built around a tag team mechanic. The Kongs have distinct abilities that set them apart, and that gives you a lot more gameplay variety, to say nothing of the hidden bonuses, the animals they can ride, and of course those unbelievably awesome minecart levels. You know, in a way, it's ironic that the graphics, which were once justly praised as Donkey Kong Country's strongest point, have lost their relevance over time, but that the gameplay itself is perhaps as vibrant and dynamic as ever. I mean, think about it. Mario needed suits to be diverse. Donkey Kong didn't need shit. Still, presentation has always been this game's calling card, and that's about more than just the graphics. In fact, one of the most memorable aspects of Donkey Kong Country is its soundtrack. This is hands down some of the best music ever included in a Nintendo release. From the funky jungle beats to the atmospheric themes of the snow and water levels, Donkey Kong Country's fantastic audio is a vital part of the experience. And it's something that, even if you haven't played the game in 15 years, you'll still be able to hum along to. You know, there's just not much to complain about with this game. It's so thoroughly well conceived and it's executed even better. This is the ultimate justice for Nintendo's hairiest icon. Donkey Kong Country gave the gorilla his rightful place atop the company's pecking order, and that's a stature and relevance he would maintain throughout much of the decade. But of course, for you and I, the lasting and most important impact of Donkey Kong Country is the game itself. The technology that made it stand out in 1994 may be outdated these days, but the art style, the music, and the gameplay haven't aged a bit. It's justly considered one of Nintendo's all-time greats, and our unofficial Donkey Kong Week has saved the apes best for last. To this day, it's still on like Donkey Kong in the masterful and timeless platforming classic, Donkey Kong Country.